Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of College Football Tuesday. I'm your host, Larry Frank, along with Zach Mckinnell. And, in a week that we knew some things could happen, we talked about it on the show last week. But before we even get into the matchups that were played last weekend, big news out of USC coming down the pipes. I believe it was late yesterday, that Clay Helton was fired. And here's a guy, Zach, 46-24. But, there's a thing about teams winning, and there's a thing about teams winning championships. And I guess they just felt after 6 years at the helm that when it came to having the right leadership, the athletic director, Bond, did not see that this was the guy fit for the job.
Yeah, and I mean, really and truly, he's been on the hot seat since his 5-7 year about 2 years ago, and really just kind of put him under the microscope. And, talking to a few of the USC people we've had on our show, they said that losing the Pac-12 championship to a 2-loss Oregon team this year that wasn't even supposed to qualify for the championship and getting blown out by them for the title really kind of was like the final straw for them. And this was a make or break year. And then you look at this past weekend, you had a Stanford team coming in after getting blown out by Kansas State, who, by the way, almost lost to an FCS team this weekend. They blow out Stanford, and then Stanford comes into the Coliseum and beats USC by, I believe, 20-something points. And so it was kind of like Clay Helton reached the pinnacle in, I believe, his second or third year by winning the Pac-12, and ever since then, he's kind of just set in that mediocre range. And also, USC, according to all reports I've heard, has been very upset that he has not been able to keep top California talent at home. They are losing the top California quarterbacks to Alabama, Clemson. Oregon got the number one player in California, I believe, 2 years ago. So Clay Helton's lack of building a wall around California and winning the games he's supposed to is ultimately what led to his demise.
Yeah, and but Zach, the question comes, why do it now? 2 games into the season when, you can go ahead, play out the season, and then maybe make those changes, because now you put an interim coach in who I would almost guarantee you will not become the head coach unless something miraculous happens the rest of the season, which I don't see that happening. But a lot of people, let's get back to the question, why now? Why not wait?
Okay, so this is kind of a twofold question. So don't want to beat my drum too hard, but we had an episode about 2 or 3 months ago where I said that due to National Signing Day getting earlier and earlier, that we could see teams bail on coaches during the season. That way they could get a head start on getting that next head coach so they don't lose recruits in early signing day. That is the whole point of USC doing this. One, they feel like the team's kind of checked out from Clay Helton, that they're not getting motivated, they're not playing for him. And you've got to remember, the other two-part fold to this question is, I don't know how many people remember it, when they got rid of Steve Sarkisian midseason, Coach Ed Orgeron went undefeated as the interim coach and almost won the Pac-12 with USC as an interim coach. So USC, based on that, has never been afraid to give the interim head coach a shot. And for me, it looks like the management is saying this is a wash year. Let's get a head start on all the other big programs and finding our head coach. That way we don't lose the recruiting battle, because I don't know how many people know this. USC have 2 5-star recruits in that recruiting class already, 1 out of the state of California and 1 out of the state of Georgia, I believe. They do not want to lose those to other programs, so they wanted to get a head start on finding their next head coach. That way they can keep some of those talented recruits in that 2022 class.
Now, Zach, real quickly, we're not going to get into the whole parade of coaches that could possibly take over this. It's a high-profile job. We're talking USC. But, I know a name that's been coming up a lot is Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, in my opinion, and once again, I want to get your opinion as well, I think it would be a mistake if not for Eric Bieniemy to take that position, not because it's not a bad position, but Eric has worked so hard to get a head coaching job in the NFL, and he's got to be by now so close. I know everyone's wondering why the heck hasn't this guy, for some reason, get a head coach job yet, but is this a case where Bieniemy can say, look, I'm not getting the opportunity to prove what I can do as a head coach in the NFL. Do I go to USC for a couple of years, show how I can build that program, and then come back to the NFL?
I would imagine Bieniemy's probably not going to get the job. I mean, I could be totally putting my foot in my mouth, but one, almost no head coaching experience at the college level. I don't think that's what USC is looking for. Two, it's a big difference between being a head coach in the NFL and college, and coming down and proving your worth in college is not the route, because we've seen so many great college coaches absolutely flame out at the next level, including Nick Saban himself flamed out at the Dolphins when he was the head coach. Pete Carroll, his first run in the NFL was absolutely atrocious.
That's right.
And so that's not a great comparison. And for me, like you mentioned, Bieniemy's been working his whole life to get that NFL head coaching job. He was the top candidate this past hiring cycle, and I could not see a case where he doesn't get a job next hiring cycle as a head coach. So in my opinion, why would you want to give up that freedom of the NFL head coach to go deal with the USC boosters, the USC AD, the USC fans that seem to be stuck in 2005, thinking that they're still a top program in the country when they have not been that in a very long time?
And for all you folks joining us on different platforms, if you can please do us a favor, if you're watching this live via video, can you please go ahead, share this to your timeline, let all your friends get involved. You can interact, leave comments. Zach and I will definitely get to it. We also want to announce that as of tonight, all Frankly Speaking Sports episodes, including College Football Tuesday, is now being shown on Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com. So a lot of growth with College Football Tuesday behind the scenes, and we want to thank Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com very, very much for including us in their program. Well, let's get to the games. We're about 15 minutes away from having Otis Kirk, who covers the Arkansas Razorbacks for Hogville and Pigtail Nation, coming on live with us. But before we get to that, and before we get to that game that featured an unbelievable game with Arkansas, let's first go to the first highlight. You know, last week, and I'll be the first one to take blame, I never in my right mind thought that the Oregon Ducks could go into Ohio State, being that the game was in Ohio State, and defeat Ohio State. Now, don't get me wrong. I didn't think that they were a bad team. I just didn't think that they would go into Ohio State and win. Oregon, 269 yards rushing. Oregon was 8 of 16 on third down conversions, 1-1 on fourth down conversions, and that running back, CJ Verdell, 20 carries, 161 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then you got Anthony Brown, who does that dual quarterback things like so many of the quarterbacks we see today in college. 17 of 35, 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 of 65 rushing. But the big thing here for me, Zach, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is when I look at Anthony Brown, the big number that sticks out, no interceptions. He played mistake-free football. He got Oregon the lead, 14-7 at halftime, 28-14 leading after the third. I mean, I thought the game with Verdell running all over the place was a tremendous game plan by Oregon.
I completely agree. They did the exact type of game plan I'd kind of laid out on our preview. They watched the film from the Minnesota game. Mohamed Ibrahim for Minnesota dominated that first half till he sadly ruptured his Achilles. Oregon said, we can do better than that. We got a better O-line. We got a better running back in CJ Verdell, and we're going to run it right down your throat. And they absolutely did an amazing job. And I believe CJ Verdell also took a screen to the end zone as well. So he had 3 total touchdowns on the day as well. But for Anthony Brown, for me, man, it was the no turnovers, but it was also his ability to be clutch in clutch situations. He wasn't carrying the offense. Like, the game plan didn't run through Anthony Brown.
Right.
But what he did is when he had to make a throw, he found a way to make it. When the pocket broke down, he was able to make plays with his legs, and it allowed them to kind of wear on that Ohio State defense late. And, all offseason, I was screaming Oregon had a shot in this game, and I kind of gave up on it when I heard Kayvon Thibodeau was out. Well, the D-line, yes, the defense gave up a lot of yards, but they were opportunistic, and they ended up stopping Ohio State. Even if they got down into the red zone, even if they got into the territory, they made plays when it mattered. A late interception by, I believe it was Bennett Williams, or Verone McKinley got that last pick. But also, if you watch the last drive, they got pressure on CJ Stroud when it mattered. When there was one drive left in the game, they had to come up with the play. The defensive line hit them every single play, and also got a crucial sack, which set up that interception play. So the defense was there when it needed to be. Oregon's legit to me, man. I think that team is finally coming into its own. If Anthony Brown can continue being a playmaker, that team is talented enough to challenge for a national championship this year under Mario Cristobal.
Yeah, and, as far as Ohio State goes, I'm not going to knock them out of it yet or anything like that, but you got to understand, first of all, 2 sacks on Stroud. He threw an interception, but let's give credit where credit was due. 3 touchdown passes, 484 yards, and they got a trifecta of receivers on that Ohio State team, despite the loss with Wilson, Najiba, and Olavi. They are really, really good out there. The problem is, it didn't seem like Ohio State was running the ball as effective as we expected, and it turned into a one-dimensional game.
It did, and as good as that offense is, the thing about it is that, really and truly, Stroud down the stretch should have been able to win that game, and a lot of those yards were just empty yards. And for me, I credit the yards to the wide receiver way more than I give it to Stroud. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are able to give him such high percentage throws, and also given the 1 touchdown, the Oregon D coordinator did a terrible job of getting in the play call late, and Michael Wright was standing there looking at his wristband, and the play snaps off, and Garrett Wilson's 10 yards behind him. You can't have that happen, and they overcame it. But the number one thing for me with this Ohio State team is, if you can't stop the run, I don't know how you expect to compete for a national title.
Right.
When you look at some of the teams, and with the Big Ten alone, after this weekend, I don't think Ohio State walks to the Big Ten title. You look at Wisconsin, they're able to run the ball down everybody's throat. So how are you planning on stopping them? Iowa, who's a top 10 team, will run the ball down your throat. Penn State has a stable of running backs that can run the ball down your throat. And then, Larry, I'm going to give you a team that I never thought I'd say they had a shot. How are you planning on stopping Michigan, who's rushed for 300 yards for 2 consecutive weeks now?
And they're now in the top 25 finally, at number 25. But let me ask you this, Zach, talking about Ohio State, we'll stay on that for a quick second before we get to the next game. But here's a team that had trouble versus Minnesota the week 1. They have trouble, obviously, versus Oregon. They lose. They're 1-1, and they still remain in the top 10 in the AP top 25. I know the poll will take care of itself by the end of the year. It usually does. But there's got to be something confusing these guys out there when you have other teams like UCLA, who's powered the heck out of both their wins, or convincing wins, and you put Ohio State, who barely wins, at number 9.
You see, I guess I'm also a victim of the moment. I kept Ohio State in my top 10 that we released. I believe it was yesterday. But the difference is a blowout win over a Hawaii team probably isn't as impressive as a close win on the road in the rain against the Minnesota team that was just a top 10 team about a year ago. And also, I think Oregon was so underrated. So it just, in my personal opinion, I thought I had Oregon in my top 10 already going into the Ohio State game. So I thought that team was never going to be blown out. And I understand you got to give them some loss, but the problem is the teams from 11 to like 15 looked atrocious this past weekend and in week 1. Miami was in the top 15. They got boat raced by Alabama. USC in the top 15. They get boat raced by Stanford. And then you look at you look at just that those teams through 11 through 15. Florida, have they looked super impressive against either one of their teams? Their starting quarterback looks atrocious. So the reason Ohio State stays that high for me is because there's no one to really take their place. And it's because no one's really proven themselves on the biggest stage. You can make an argument for UCLA, but looking at LSU and how they struggled in the first half against McNeese State, I don't know how big of a win that's going to be down the line. So for me, it's more like a default ranking rather than, Ohio State just kind of getting the benefit of the doubt.
Well, and another team, when you look at the rankings, and, before the season started, and you remember this conversation, I know you will, I told you, I did not think there was 2 teams that I think are not top 25 teams. We'll talk about the second one a little bit later. But the first one was the Miami Hurricanes, who are still ranked at number 24th. We know what Alabama did to them. Then comes in Appalachian State, who you and I said, watch out here. And this game came down to the wire. I'm not a big D King fan, De'Aaron King fan, although he did okay. I mean, he's a dual quarterback, but I thought, Cameron Harris, 18 rushes, 91 yards. For App State, Chase Bryce, 199 yards passing. It's just that I don't know how to describe it, but you'll know what I mean. Miami doesn't have it. It's that word, it. They just, when they playing, they don't have it. And I don't know what the word it is defined as, but they don't play with that intensity that other Power 5 teams play like. It's almost like they lack some confidence in their ability. And, losing to Alabama, all right, I'll tell you. There's no reason that if you're a top 15 team that you're going to let, and I'm not discrediting Appalachian State. We know how good they are. But to let them, go ahead and pretty much, you barely beat them.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, they're just the epitome of like mediocre. And it's just they're never too high, but like they'll never beat the elite of the elite. And they just squeak by these middle of the road teams, and then they'll blow out the teams they're supposed to win. Like when you look at the projected win totals, like that's exactly what they do every year because they beat the teams they should beat, and then they get absolutely destroyed anytime they face any real talent. They did it last year when they let North Carolina run for 500 on them. They did it last year when they let Clemson blow their doors off. Then they let Alabama do it. Then they struggle with a solid Appalachian State team. We're going to find out this week, though, really and truly, this next game, Michigan State comes down to Miami to face them in a big game. They're Miami's 6-point favorites. If Miami loses that game, go ahead and write them off because the season's pretty much over. But it could be a great momentum win if they can find a way to pull that game off.
And we're going to discuss that game later when we go over. But I'm telling you right now, I'm picking Michigan State in that game. But another game that you and I thought we knew would be a decent game was the Iowa versus Iowa State game. I actually picked Iowa to win this game, and they did. But if you look at this game, this is the thing, Zach, that really threw me off. In every facet of that game, all the numbers, all the statistics, Iowa State won that game, except one big category that you and I talk about week in and week out. They lost the turnover. They didn't lose it. They got crushed in the turnover battles with 4 turnovers for Iowa State. The game, it was Purdy versus, I guess Purdy and Deckles both quarterbacks. I thought Deckles did a decent job when he came in. Purdy was 13 of 27, threw 3 interceptions, got sacked twice, so he's running for his life. But, your buddy Spencer Petras, I mean, I don't know how he keeps doing it. We keep saying he's all right, but I don't know if a Petras guy can win. But the guy keeps finding ways to pull it out. I mean, he only had 106 yards passing, but listen to this stat. Iowa State, 339 total yards of offense. Iowa, 173, okay? They won, like I said, in all facets of the game. But the turnover game, we talk about how important that is, and there's one other statistics that's even more important to that, and that's the final score, which Iowa ended up winning. They were ranked 10th at that time versus number 9 Iowa State.
Absolutely. I'm so vocal on my podcast. I hate like other shows who are just like, you can tell when you go on like YouTube or something and they're just reading the box score. And it's like, you didn't watch the game. Like, you got to go watch the film, because if you look at the box score, Iowa State won that game. But the thing about it is you can't put stock in the yardage for Iowa, because how many times do they have short fields? They didn't have to establish drives because you gave them the ball at the 20. So even when you had to go get an 80-yard drive, Iowa was at the 20. They just had to get 20 yards. And so the stats won't ever reflect it. And I want to say this. The Iowa defense has been probably the most impressive unit in the country this season. They absolutely embarrassed Michael Penix the first week of the season, forced him into 3 interceptions. They had a pick 6. They get a fumble return for a touchdown this weekend. They forced Brock Purdy into 3 interceptions, cost maybe his job. And also they shut Breece Hall down at running back, who led the country in rushing yards last year. This defense plays so opportunistic. They're so disciplined, and they just play with such a hard-nosed nature. The way this game played out is exactly how Kirk Ferentz in Iowa would love to win every single game on their schedule. They don't care if it's pretty. They don't care if you enjoyed watching it on TV. They're going to go in. They're going to bully you. They're going to control the pace of the game and make it theirs. They're going to play really great defense, and they're going to score when they need to, and they're going to put points on the board, and Iowa's going to come out with the win. You're going to be sitting there in the locker room being like, man, I felt like we should have won that game. And they don't care that you felt like that. They're going to keep winning like that. And for me, I was so impressed with how Iowa won that game this weekend.
And, you'd rather win ugly than lose pretty,
Exactly.
I mean, and that's why I say, a lot of people right there, if I just showed the statistics, like you said, of both teams, you would have guaranteed me probably that, Iowa State prevailed in that. Let's talk about the next game. The game and a team that I'm telling everybody to watch out for. Now, don't get me wrong. They have a hell of a tough schedule the remaining of the season, but you got to be impressed with this Arkansas running game and this Arkansas defense. I mean, 333 yards rushing, 4 or 5 different guys over 40 yards rushing for them. KJ Jefferson, 75 yards rushing, a touchdown, 136 yards passing. They whooped up on Texas. They didn't beat Texas, the number 15 team. They whooped them 40-21. Texas only 256 total yards. The one statistic, if you want to talk about statistics, that stuck out, and great credit to that Arkansas defense. 4 of 13 only Texas on third down conversions. And Cardin Thompson only had 110 yards passing combined. This was a team, Trellon Smith, 12 rushes, 75 yards. But, when you watch this Arkansas team, I know they're ranked 20th right now, but it could be as early as next week. This is definitely a top 15 ball club with that defense and this running game. And, it was just unbelievable to watch this game.
I don't think I could have been any more impressed with the team than I was Arkansas after this week. You mentioned it. When you run for 300 plus yards on a top 15 team, it is it is absolutely impressive. And Arkansas, man, I mentioned, I believe on this show last week, that Sam Pittman might have been the most underrated hire in the SEC two coaching cycles ago. They play such fast, physical, and motivated football, and it just looks so fun to play in that system. And the defense played outstanding. I mean, when you look at what they did to Bijan Robinson, holding him to 3.5 yards per carry, under 70 yards rushing, and they made both quarterbacks look just atrocious this weekend. So for me, I was so impressed with KJ Jefferson at quarterback, Smith at running back. Personally, in my opinion, this team is going to be a problem for a lot of people. Catalan at safety is going to be a star. Like, that is a potential first-round pick, in my opinion. I thought Henry and Bumper Pool were also excellent on the defensive side of the ball. Arkansas is legit, and with LSU, so I asked my co-host this on our show, and I'm going to ask you: when you look at how LSU looks this year, and now A&M lost their starting quarterback, if I told you that Arkansas finished second to third in the SEC West, I don't think you would be shocked.
No, I mean, why would you be? But, let me explain to you, and we'll be getting Otis on here in a minute. They got a tough road. I don't want, the first thing Arkansas has to do is they have to concentrate on this game coming up this Saturday. They cannot lose focus. They can't think Texas A&M. They can't think about it. Georgia Southern, if you do not come ready to play, they will surprise you and whoop your butt. They did it to Florida, I think, back in 2013, beat them 26-20 when they went in the swamp. This Georgia Southern team has had 5 winning seasons in the last 7 games. So for those of you folks out there that are listening, that you think, just because Arkansas, and believe me, Sam Pittman will not let this team lose focus. But, we'll get into that a little bit more right now as we bring in our special guest. It is my great honor, thrill, and pleasure to welcome in to our College Football Tuesday studios. He covers the Arkansas Razorbacks for Hogville and Pigtail Nation. Let's welcome in Otis Kirk. Otis, how you doing today, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for asking me to be on here, man. Appreciate it.
Well, Otis, let me ask you this. Before we even talk about the unbelievable win this Saturday, I have to ask you, I lived in Fayetteville. You knew that. We talked last year sometime, or 2 years ago.
Right.
I have to ask you, what was the feeling and atmosphere like and the noise level in Fayetteville this weekend?
Man, it's still buzzing. I'm telling you what, and because it's been a long time coming. When you win one SEC game in 3 years, it kind of, then this happens. You won 3 last year, but before that they won 1 game in 3 years, SEC game in 3 years. No, it's man. The fans have been pretty loyal to them, and they're being rewarded this year. And I listened to you guys when I was backstage, I guess you call it. But you're perfectly right. This team, Sam Pittman was a very underrated hire. I agree with you 200% on that. And this team is not good enough to overlook anybody, but I don't think they will, because we're talking about Georgia Southern. But yeah, but no, the buzz is great. I mean, people have got something to be excited about when it comes to college football, because Razorback football, there's not been, let's be honest, there's not been much to be excited about in recent years. Last year was better, but this year you're starting off 2-0, and there's some stars aligning for them. As you said, A&M's got a hurt quarterback. But I tell you, if there was ever a trap game ever in the schedule, you beat Texas, you got Texas A&M next week. Boy, Georgia Southern's sitting right there. You talking about a trap game, you got to be careful. That's all I'm saying. You've got to be real careful right there. I mean, they killed Louisiana Tech in a bowl game last year, if I'm not badly mistaken. They beat them pretty bad. And Louisiana Tech's always a competitive program. And I'm just telling you, but knowing this team and this staff like I do, I don't think they'll overlook anybody. I mean, there was times last year when they could have got there and they didn't. I mean, they fought back. They lost their quarterback at Missouri. They go out there and they almost beat Missouri at Missouri, without Felipe Frank. This team plays hard for Sam Pittman because they believe in Sam Pittman. If I got time to tell you a real quick story about that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, last year there was a senior who lost his job, and he lost it after the Missouri game. He lost it, and before they played Alabama in the senior day at Fayetteville, and he didn't get to play. And yet after it's all over, he goes, Sam Pittman is the best, treats his players better than any coach I've ever seen. This guy had played at other schools, said he's the best coach as far as he treats his players. He loves his players, and he treats them very fair. And this was a guy that had lost his job. Most time you'll hear him say bad. He still was very complimentary of Sam Pittman. So Sam has got these kids believing, and they're going to go out there and play hard for it. That's why I don't think there'll be a letdown this Saturday, but there better not be because they can't afford it.
And, you talk about Sam, and, even when he came over through the pandemic, they didn't have practices. It almost was like Sam had been there for years, the way he acted, the way he presented himself, the way he provided leadership through all this. It's almost, if you didn't know better, you think he'd been there for years. And the other thing with Sam is he's always, I don't think I've ever seen that guy negative. He always seems positive and motivating that team.
You come in and you inherit a 2-10 team. Then comes to COVID. You have no spring practice, very limited summer contact, which is not like we talk about where it wasn't team meetings. You had to break it into individual deals. It was a mess. And never once did he say, why me? Or complain, what a mess I've inherited, He kept it positive. He said, he made the best of a bad situation. That's what Sam always done, and that's what he'll continue to do. And I have no doubt he'll continue to do that. But yeah, it would have been very easy last year to start making excuses when they did start practicing before the season. Never once did he make an excuse about no spring, or this and that. Yeah, he just said, we're going to deal with it. That's the hand, it's kind of the hand they were dealt, and so they had no choice but deal with it. And so that's what he did. And you got to admire that. I mean, there's different ways of coaching, but you can't be somebody you're not. There's coaches that will get in your face. And Bobby Petrino would get in your face, and that was way he coached, and kids adjusted to that. But you can't ask. Sam is very positive, doesn't really do that. But there's not a wrong way is what I'm saying, guys. But you've got to be who you are, and that's what Sam Pittman continues to be. He is who he is, and that the kids are that.
So, okay, Kirk, let me ask you this. I want to talk a little bit about KJ Jefferson a little bit. And I found an interesting story when I was listening to the game the other day. I watched the game, and, he gives a lot of credit to Felipe Franks for making him a good quarterback. He said he got to sit out. He transferred over. Most people that transfer over expect that they're going to be able to play at that position. Then Felipe Franks comes over, but he said he would not be where he is today as a quarterback if it wasn't for last year's quarterback, Felipe Franks, which I thought was very, very interesting.
Yeah, and that's true. Here's what happened. There were some people when Arkansas took Felipe Franks, was worried about how his deal ended at 40, and there was a question taking him, but Felipe was never like that at Arkansas. He came in at midterm, got elected the captain of the team, one of the captains on offense. They had two captains, he and Rakeem Boyd. And Felipe he kept a positive attitude, was a leader here, and he worked with KJ. And he was one of the reasons when he went down when he got hurt in the LSU game and played against Missouri. That was one of the reasons that KJ was so ready to play in that game, was because Felipe had coached him up and worked with him and built KJ's confidence up too. I mean, it was amazing that KJ Felipe, we'd heard all these things about him at Florida, and none of it was true at Arkansas. I don't know what happened with him at Florida, but I do know nothing negative ever happened with Felipe at Arkansas. He was a leader. He worked with KJ, and the whole team rallied around Felipe. They voted him team captain. He was there and for the season, and as we were talking earlier, you got to remember, it wasn't like the whole team was around Felipe all the time with the COVID rules, He just made an impact with people, and that's why he got voted captain. He's a big reason KJ is playing as well as he is today.
And, talk about this running back by committee here at Arkansas, which amazing 333 yards rushing versus the number 15 Texas team. I mean, they're just incredible the way they're running that football.
Yeah, and what's kind of cool about this, they've got 4 running backs that scored touchdowns Saturday, and all 4 of them are different type backs. You've got Traylon Smith is a small, fast guy, shifty, real small, but shifty, tough kid. Dominic Johnson is kind of your big bruiser, but he's a lot shiftier than you think he is. Then A.J. Green is a true freshman who Traylon's fast, but he's probably the fastest player he may be the fastest player on the team. I'd love to see he and a couple other kids run a race, but A.J. Green got great speed. That was his debut, but he's bigger than Traylon. He's like 200 pounds, He was a sprinter in Tulsa Union. And then you've got, of course, Rocket Sanders, who's just a kind of a combination guy. He's 220 or so, but got power, but he's got speed. He's kind of a combination. So all 4 of them bring something different to the table. That's what's neat, to have 4 running backs that play, and there's not a you don't just keep repeating the same guy when you put him in. You get a little bit different from each guy, and I think Jimmy Smith gets credit for that, and then Sam Pittman. They know how to use those guys, and there's a situation for each of them, and that's what they do. They find a situation, the best situation. Sam had those guys. And Kendall Browse had a good idea when to put Dominic in down there around the goal line. He broke some tackles and scored. They were settling for field goals. They put Dominic in. He goes in the end zone. And then they get AJ in later, who didn't play against Rice because he was hurt. And he just outruns the Texas. I mean, they had the angle on AJ Green on that play. He just outran him for that 30-yard touchdown. Yep. And then Rocket, he just runs over people. He's got a deceiving speed. And then, like we said, Traylon Smith, I mean, he was there last year. He's the one guy, the 4 that played last year. Really, Dominic redshirted, and the other 2 were in high school. But Traylon is a solid player. He really came in last year. There was some adversity with Rakeem, opting out and stuff. And Traylon just stepped right in and took the baton and moved on and played well.
Now, we're talking to Otis Kirk, who covers the Arkansas Razorbacks, talking about their big win over the weekend over number 15 Texas. Otis, the most impressive thing about this team, I really get fired up when I mentioned it, is the way this defense, they're a top-ranked 50th team in the nation by far. They're probably even better than that. And the most amazing statistics that I saw today, and there's so many of them on this defense, is that they're only allowing 2.7 yards per carry by the opponent. That is just unbelievable.
Yeah, part of that is they got John Ridgway from Illinois State, 6'6", 320 pounds. This kid came in. They beat State, Texas, Oklahoma, Southern Cal, you name it, Michigan. They beat them all to get this kid. He went in the transfer portal, and he had like 8 or 9 offers. And I'm talking about elite offers right off the bat. And Arkansas got him. He is plugged in that middle. He didn't play against Rice either. He had an appendectomy. But I think one thing, and you guys hit on this earlier, you were talking about the linebackers. You've got Hayden Henry, Grant Morgan, and Bumper Poole. You've got 3 linebackers playing as well as any linebackers in the country right now. 3 of them, not 2, but 3. And those guys have just been outstanding. And then, of course, you can't, even though he's a safety, you can't count out Cadillac on helping some of that, because he will come up and knock you out if you're not careful. That kid is I agree with you guys. I think he's a big time, and that defense, Barry Odom, I don't know. I mean, you could say argument that he's the best defensive. He may be one of the best. Let me put it this way: he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. I mean, this guy knows what he's doing. He put in a completely different game plan for Texas than he had for Rice, because in Texas, Coach Sarkisian after the game the other night said, Arkansas did some things that we didn't see on film. That's because Barry Odom didn't show it against Rice. He did against Texas, and he's got a plan each week, and so he's very good at his job. And they've had to keep him both years he's been here, and I'm sure it won't be any different this offseason, but he's friends with Sam, and Barry's good. Barry's a great coach. He's not a good one. He's a great defensive coordinator. I know he was. I didn't think he was a bad head coach at Missouri, but I mean, he was 4-0 against Arkansas. But he's a great defensive coordinator. Whatever he is, a head coach, he's great at defensive coordinator.
Zach, go ahead, buddy. Jump in there.
Yeah, so I mean, just being around the program, I know the biggest thing is the culture. It seems different. The energy around the program is different under Pittman. What have been the biggest differences you've seen in the Sam Pittman squad compared to the team under Chad Morris?
Well, and the players got asked that last week in some press conferences, and I think the biggest thing is just what we've talked about. Like, Sam is positive. He doesn't bring the used car approach. I mean, a used car salesman approach that some coaches do. And I think that Sam, the players believe in him. They trust him. What he is, and here's what I hear from a lot of the players, guys. They say what they tell you, not just Sam, but the whole staff, what they tell you, that's what it is. And when you're honest with people, sometimes you tell them things they don't want to hear right then. But deep down, most of the time, they know you're telling them the truth. We don't want to be criticized, but sometimes if people tell you something, you may get a little bit irritated at them, but they really tell me the truth, And so I think that's part of it. I think these guys just trust Sam and the staff. They're honest with them. They keep it positive. But if they need a good butt chewing, they give them one, But that's not the way they coach. They don't come out there angry and teach that way. There's different ways of getting your message across. And I'm not saying any way is wrong. I'm just saying that this staff doesn't do it that way. You can go to practice. We only get 20 minutes most days, but they're one thing, and I will tell you this, one thing that this staff believes in doing is when somebody makes a mistake, they believe in stopping, practice, tell them what they did wrong and how to fix it. Don't just scream at them. I've seen coaches just scream at somebody that makes mistakes. This staff believes in stopping it, explaining to the kid what he did wrong so he won't do it again. Because if you just scream at a kid, he may not know what I did, what I do. They explain how to do it, what he did wrong and how to do it right. And it's a teaching method. And I think kids really appreciate that. Heck, when somebody tells me something that helps me, I appreciate it, I think that's just human nature that we appreciate when somebody, instead of hollering at us or something, they take time to explain, hey, you could do better, and I think human nature, we appreciate that. If you don't, there's something wrong with you,
Absolutely.
But the culture's a lot different.
Oh, man, absolutely. But, my last two questions. One is about Jalen Catalon at safety. You mentioned him a little bit. For me, he looks like the type of guy who could be a first-round pick coming out of Fayetteville if everything works out for him. What makes him such a special player, and where did he come from? Because there's a lot of people who have not heard his name up until this weekend, even though he's a multi-time SEC All-American already.
Yeah, he was out of Mansfield Legacy. Mark Smith, defensive back coach under Chad Morris, recruited him and Tarian Carter and Enoch Jackson. Enoch has since left, but Tarian plays quite a bit. But he was hurt his first year at Arkansas and redshirted. he was hurt. He played a little bit. He played 4 games, I think, if not 3, but I think it was 4 because he reserved his red shirt. He kept his red shirt. Then last year he kind of burst onto the scene. I'm going to tell you about Traylon Burks, who is a receiver that we're not talking about because he's not really been featured so far, but he will be, and he's another first-round draft. But he says, I'm careful going across the middle in practice because I don't want to get knocked out by Jalen Catalon. This kid, he plays with one speed, and he's gotten booted a couple of times for the targeting, but he doesn't. He tries to be smart with that, but he's still aggressive. And I think sometimes he just hits so hard that it looks worse than what maybe it was. There was. I think the LSU game, maybe I'm a games, but we're talking last year. I believe it was the LSU game. He got a targeting call and had to sit out the first half of the Missouri game, and I thought it was an awful call. And in fairness, I thought Nick Bolton at Missouri got the same bad call against Arkansas. So it kind of even things out. I thought both of them, neither one should have been thrown out of the game. But anyway, I think Catalon is just, I think he's as good as any safety in America. The guy can play the pass. One thing that impresses me, he got 2 interceptions in the Rice game. He plays the ball in the air so well. And a lot of people can't do that. They will play the guy. I've seen this so many times at Arkansas. It just drove me crazy. They would play the guy and not go for the ball and then hit the guy when he caught it. But, you can turn around and get the ball, and Catalon does that. He plays the ball without getting burnt deep, letting them get behind him. He's just smart. He was a quarterback in high school. He played some safety, but he's also a quarterback in high school. One thing that hurt him his senior year, he was playing was it Jinx, I believe, out of Oklahoma? I believe it was Jinx. Anyway, he was in Oklahoma, his first high school game as a senior. He got hurt at quarterback and didn't play anymore that year. He hurt his knee, and so he was out all season. So he only played 1 game. So he had offers to Texas and a bunch of schools to recruit him, but he didn't probably get the hype they would have had he not gotten hurt. But no, and I think that high school quarterback stuff helps him at safety because I think he can – you kind of have a tendency to know what they're going to do, and I think that really helped him. But yeah, you're right about Catalon. He's a big time player. He and Traylon Burks, Ricky Stromberg, some of those kids are about as good as you get. And like I said, right now, and maybe not NFL stuff, but those 3 linebackers are playing as well as anybody in the country is 3 linebackers.
Absolutely. And my last question for me is, we got the big win over Texas, 2-0 now. You got the trap game this weekend. Looking ahead at the schedule, just in your opinion, what is the ceiling and or floor for this Arkansas team moving forward for the season?
Good question. And, I was on the SEC radio network the other day, and what I said then, and what I said, I wrote in preseason back earlier in the summer, quite a bit earlier. I said the key to this season was win the 6 home games at Fayetteville and then win the game in Little Rock. You got UAPB in Little Rock. You won 2 in Arkansas. You got Georgia Southern, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Missouri coming to Fayetteville. Okay, if you can go 6, and I'm not saying they will because all those are winnable, all of them are losable. But if you win those 6 and then you beat UAPB, you got 7 wins. Okay, then you go to Arlington, you play A&M. That's a home game for Arkansas, but we know it's a neutral side. It's not a home setting, but it's counted as a home game. But you go to Arlington, you got a game that, especially with Haynes King out now, I think you got a chance to win that. Then you go on the road, you've got Georgia, you've got Alabama, and you probably get those teams, let's be honest. They're probably not going. But then you go to Ole Miss and you go to LSU. Earlier in the preseason, back in the summer earlier, when I wrote this, I think I picked them to win 8. I had them win 7 games, yeah. But I thought they might beat Ole Miss, but I'm telling you right now, I think LSU might be easier to beat than Ole Miss. I think they're both winnable games. They're both winnable games. Both of them are losable games. But just judging how the season has gone to this point, you might, if you're going to steal a road game, it might be at LSU instead of Oxford. But if you did that and you took care of yourself at home, that's 8 wins. And then if you did beat A&M, that's 9, no matter what happens with Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia. Hey, if 9-3 and Sam Pittman's not coach of the year in college football, there's something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely there. And last question before we let you run, Otis. Let's talk about the game at hand, the one coming up this weekend versus Georgia Southern. I mean, as I said earlier in the show, this is a team that's had last 5 of 7 seasons, had a winning record. And the thing about them is they have a very, very tricky offense. They run a triple offense, a quadruple offense, a quintuplet offense. I mean, they got all these different formations. What is the key for this already excitable, confident, and powerful defense that they have to do in order to go ahead and attack this different formations that they throw at them?
Yeah, well, here's what's crazy. You look at that schedule, and Arkansas actually worked against Georgia Southern's offense some back during the preseason, before this week, and because they were worried about that. They didn't want to try to put all in 3 or 4 weekly practices during the week. I think the key is it's kind of like it is right now. The key with this Arkansas team, and they've done a better job this year than they did last year, is get off the field on third down. Limit the big plays. You can't give up the big play because that's what can happen in the triple option. You pull coverage, but Arkansas has pretty good speed on defense. I think they will, and they see a little bit of that with KJ Jefferson and Malik Hornsby and those, Lucas Coley and those guys in practice running that. So not the same offense, but they do see the options some. But I think Arkansas's key is just get off the field on third down. Don't give up big plays. Just make them beat you and make them grind it and beat you. And if they do that, then you go shake their hands. But I think that's the key is just, like I said, get off the field on third down and eliminate the big plays, and don't have foolish penalties. You get them in 3rd and 4 or something, 3rd and 6. Don't jump off sides. That's what they did a couple of scrimmages there. They made some penalties that you just can't do, and Sam wasn't happy about that. Now I think they only had 3 or 4 penalties Saturday night on the whole team, so they've cleaned that up quite a bit, and they've got to keep that part clean. And then and one thing too in the special teams, don't get punch blocked, and don't give. Biggest thing is don't give Georgia Southern short fields to go. Make them drive make them earn. Like I said, make them earn everything they get. Grind it out. Don't short field. Don't give them turnovers. Don't give them cheap. Don't get cheap penalties, and don't get off the field on third down. If you do that, you're going to take care. Arkansas should be fine.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did versus Texas. Only let them convert 4 times out of 13 attempts on third down. So if they do something similar that they get there, I think they'll be very successful.
If this team can get off the field on third down, they've got a chance against anybody they play. Now, I'm not saying they're going to beat Alabama. I've already said they will. I'm just saying they can make those games competitive is what I'm saying. I mean, when they get off the field on third down, halfway through the season last year, they started having issues with that. And as long as they don't have issues with that, but part of that was they were playing without players because, like against LSU, they only had about 4 defensive linemen healthy without COVID to play against LSU. So that was part of the issue last year in the second half of the season. They were just without players.
Also,
listen, Otis, we want to thank you so very much for giving us your time tonight on College Football Tuesday. We really appreciate you coming on again for us.
Oh, anytime. Thank you guys. Got a great show. Appreciate you asking me. Like I said Saturday night, I appreciate both of you asking me, and I'm always available, man. Thank you. Okay.
And Otis, look what I'm wearing, buddy. I got the red shirt on. I got the
I saw that when I came up. I've got a red shirt, but it's actually a Hogville shirt. I wore it for Lanny Beaver, so it's a Hogville shirt, no Razorback shirt. Well, I told Lanny last year when he bought shirts, he wanted to buy me 2 shirts. I said, don't get white because I'm a pig when I eat. I'll get food on. Don't get red because, Razorback. And he goes and gets me a red one and a black one. So he didn't get the white one, thank God. But yeah, so I wear this red one occasionally. But yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, my friend.
Appreciate you. Thank you, man. Appreciate y'all.
You too. That was the great Otis Kirk, who covers the Arkansas Razorbacks, and great information there. I mean, Just incredible information. We're going to go to the games now that are being played this week. There was one game left that I wanted to go over, and it was the North Carolina State game. They got upset. Let's go ahead and do that real quickly before we go to next week's game. Mississippi State versus North Carolina State, and everybody's talking. We talked about the surprise team, but this, first of all, this was a game that was played in the air. There was no rushing in this game. If you got to see the highlights of this game, it was all passing. 294 yards for Will Rogers of Mississippi State, 2 touchdowns. Devin Leary's 30 of 49, 303 yards, a touchdown, but he had pressure on him all day long. He was sacked 4 times. Real quickly, Zach, what's your take on this game?
Hey, they fell right into Mike Leach's trap. I don't know what type of poison or spell he put NC State under. Why in the world would you get in a passing shootout with the king of the air raid attack in Mike Leach? That made zero sense to me. The weakness of that Mississippi State team is the front 7. The fact that you couldn't get Zonovan Knight any space on the inside of that defense was just atrocious. And there's 2 things you could be sure of. 1, Nick Saban's probably going to outcoach you in any game you play against him. And 2, you're losing an air raid shootout against Mike Leach if you're just going to sit back and throw the ball all day. And that's exactly what happened. NC State played Mississippi State's type of game. They were already on the road, and it came back and bit them because they have to establish the run with Zonovan Knight, or they're going to get beat. And this is just another black mark on the ACC this year. That conference looks atrocious as of right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and talk first big game of the week. Number 1, Alabama versus number 11, Miami. Whoa, Miami versus Florida, I should say.
I'm about to say, listen, if they're playing again, I don't want to watch it. I'll pass on the game. We don't have to cover it. I know who's going to win.
I tell you what, there's a flip. Stay right there. Don't go away. I'm fixing it, buddy, because I don't like it. All right, tell me if it looks better. How's that look? Okay, number 1, Alabama, the 2-0 versus Florida 2-0. Definitely a different type of 2-0. But, this is a team, first of all, you talked about Florida's quarterback situation. 4 interceptions for Emory Jones last week. This is a team that played only FAU and USF, like you said earlier. But, I'm a big Bryce Young fan, okay? He's thrown for 600 yards already this year, 7 touchdowns, hasn't thrown an interception this year. He seems to hook up real well with Jamison Williams. I'm sorry, and I could be really upsetting Gator fans here, but I don't think the Gators have a prayer here.
They don't. I'm looking right now. That's what I was doing while you were talking. The spread is 14.5. Give me double that. I think Bama wins by 28 to 30 points in this game. I think they win it running away, especially because, we mentioned AR-15 as he goes by. Mr. Anthony Richardson was probably their only hope, and he's hurt. Most likely. I haven't heard any reports that he's out, but he's probably going to be limited at most. And Emory Jones is going to get eaten alive. The weakness of Florida is the offensive line, and I beg y'all to go watch the Miami game and see what happens when your weakness is the offensive line. Florida has an abysmal run game. We saw it all last year. They don't have Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts to save them this time. The wide receiving core is unproven, and the defense lost multiple top pieces. Marco Wilson, they lost James Houston to Jackson State as a transfer. They don't have anybody who I trust to stop a single soul. I think Alabama wins this game by some score. It's probably going to be, I would say, like 45-14 or something like that in Gainesville this weekend.
Yeah, and the next game, we talk about your boys here, the Auburn versus Penn State. And I'm going to tell you something. This Penn State defense is something to be reckoned with. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Sean Clifford as their quarterback. Once again, here's another quarterback who has a unbelievable defense behind him. And what he does is, the thing about Sean Clifford is he's a game manager. He manages the game and he doesn't turn the ball over. And, you got to give him a lot of credit there. But on the same token, when I look at Auburn, Bo Nix does what he has to do to win. So at the end of the day, buddy, I want to see Auburn win this game. I'm telling you that right now. But this Penn State defense, listen to this. In 2 games, McLean has 24 tackles. Popoi has 17 tackles. And Moultrie has 16 tackles and 2 sacks. You know what? All 3 of them are linebackers. What does that tell you? You cannot get through the second level on this team. In order for Auburn to win, what they have to do is get to the second level. And they do have a guy that possibly can do that in Jaquez, is it Hunter?
Hunter, yeah.
Hunter, I'm sorry.
Hunter, yeah.
Hunter, who, has 257 yards, I think, on the season. So, I just don't know. I think that, we talked about Arkansas's defense being real good. This is another team that has a dominant defense.
Yeah, and the funny part is Jaquez Hunter is not even the starter for Auburn at running back. He's the freshman backup, and he's just been doing that in jump time. He's averaging 18 yards per carry this year as the backup. And Tank Bigsby's the starter, and he's averaging 10 yards per carry and was voted the best running back in college football by Pro Football Focus. But none of that matters. The only thing that matters is Bo Nix looks like a youth league quarterback on the road. He looks like an NFL starter at home. And the fact that this is in probably the most electric environment in the country, is going to be packed. It's going to be loud. It's a whiteout. The fans are excited to be there. Penn State's a top 10 team. Bo Nix plays like such a different quarterback on the road. He's only has 3 turnovers at home in Jordan Hare in terms of interceptions, thrown 10 on the road. His completion percentage drops from 62% to 50% on the road, and he's never thrown for over 250 yards away from Jordan Hare. It's going to be a problem. And for me, if this was a Jordan Hare, give me Auburn money line all day. I'd take whatever spread you want to give. Auburn would win this game in Jordan Hare. But it being in Happy Valley on the road, I really think, I'm actually recording this preview right when we get done with this show for our channel. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I have Penn State winning a close one against Auburn this week in Happy Valley.
Yeah, and like you said, if this game's in Auburn, I may inch that there's a possibility. I never want to say never, because we know on any given day any team can win, but the cards are not flipped the right way here for the Auburn Tigers.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm atrociously wrong. I hope Auburn wins 55-0 going away, but I can't see it this week, man. I think that undefeated record comes to a close this weekend.
Yeah, and I'm going to go over the next 4 games, which I think are very interesting matchups with you. I want to make sure I got my notes. You look at these teams out there, and if I'm correct, this is Herm Edwards' team at Arizona State, I believe, out there. What a job he's doing over there. But this is a BYU team that has won 2 very close games. They beat Utah, as you know. This is a game where Arizona State, another dual threat quarterback in Jaden Daniels, and they who is going to go up against the running back of Tyler Algier, however you pronounce that last name, who has done real well. But this is a team out there that you and I talked about that is just quietly BYU under the radar that's winning some close games.
Yeah, so this actually kind of caps. BYU's not in the Pac-12. This is their 3rd straight Pac-12 team that they faced to open the season. They've beat Arizona and Washington not Washington, Arizona and Utah to open the season, and now they're going to try to get the Arizona sweep against Arizona State. You have to give BYU credit. They lost so much talent last year, including Zach Wilson, to the NFL, and a lot of people weren't really sure who his replacement was going to be. And if you look if you look at the stats, 5 touchdowns, over 400 yards in the first 2 weeks of the season for Hall at the starting quarterback of BYU. And also, the thing about Arizona State is, I just wonder if Jaden Daniels can go out and win the game he's supposed to, because he's so electric, across the whole season. He's so consistent, doesn't make a lot of turnovers, but he never goes out and wins that game he's supposed to. He never wins that it factor game. That's that type of game for Arizona State. They have 0 run game. Jaden Daniels is like their only source of offense right now. If that's the case this weekend, I see a tough weekend on the horizon for Arizona State to beat this BYU team, who has proven they are looking to face Power 5 teams and eliminate them. And they did it last year multiple times, and they've done it twice to start kickout this year. BYU cannot be slept on going into this game.
And another team that can't be slept on, and we talked earlier about how I don't think Ohio State should be ranked where they are. Another team that I don't think should be ranked where they are is number 12, Notre Dame, who plays Purdue this week. And I'll tell you what, this Plummer kid for Purdue is unbelievable. You were just talking about a quarterback that doesn't make many mistakes. He's thrown for 600 yards in 2 games, 6 touchdowns. David Bell has 14 receptions, 255 yards, 3 touchdowns. And, you and I have talked about Notre Dame quarterback Jack Cohn. We talked about Mike Mayer. But this is a Notre Dame team that barely beat FSU, who looked terrible this weekend versus, I believe it was Jacksonville State. And then also, I think Notre Dame, it was Toledo they went to the wire with this weekend. But at the end of the day, you give credit where credit's due. They've won the ball game. You'd rather win than play a great game and lose. But at the end of the day, this is a Purdue team that could knock Notre Dame out of the top 15.
Yeah, this is one of the games I'm not really buying the national narrative on this one. I think Notre Dame runs away with this one. When you look at the opponents that Purdue's kind of beating up on, Oregon State was fairly impressive, but I personally just don't think they're that good. And then their other game, I believe, was a D2 team, if I'm not mistaken, maybe an FCS team, right, and they kind of blew them out. Notre Dame, when you look at it, yes, Florida State lost to Jacksonville State, but I cover the FCS. That's a top 10 FCS team with real FCS national championship players on that team. The Jacksonville State has done this where they've upset Power 5 teams. So I'm not putting a lot of stock into Florida State's just that bad rather than Jacksonville State's good. And also, you got to look at Notre Dame. New starting quarterback, 8 new starters on defense, and 4 new offensive linemen going into Tallahassee on a Sunday night with that stadium packed out. And they were dominating that game until that Mackenzie Milton switch kind of threw all the momentum aloof. And then you win a close game, you win an overtime game. I saw some rust against Toledo. I did. But you just came off a huge emotional high. You came off a whole extra, quarter of action in overtime. For me, I think they rebound this weekend. I think they beat Purdue pretty handily. I know that Plummer looks good. I know Bell's a legit wide receiver. I just don't think on the defensive side of the ball they're going to have any answers for Notre Dame.
Well, we're allowed to disagree on our first game, right? Yeah, so that's all right. We've done that. I won't say who's in the lead for the year. We won't even talk about that. But another game that, and you may agree with me, you may not, and I think you actually mentioned this earlier, Zach, if I remember correctly, is number 24 Miami playing Michigan State. And, I don't hate Miami. Okay, maybe I do. But at the end of the day, I don't think Miami is that great. I really just don't. Yes, they played Alabama. We talked about that earlier. But this Michigan State team, is 2-0. I know they beat Youngstown, I think it was, over the weekend. They beat Northwestern. they have Peyton Thorne, another guy. We're talking. The one impressive thing I'm seeing about some of these 2-0 teams, and I guess it makes sense when you think about it, the quarterbacks are playing mistake-free football, and it just goes to show you when you don't make mistakes and you don't have penalties, you'll win ball games. But the big question is going to be, can Miami stop Kenneth Walker III? That's what's going to be the 264 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns versus Northwestern. I wanted to go back 2 games ago and see what he did. So he didn't say, well, they were only playing Youngstown. Well, no, I went back to Northwestern, who has been a good team in the past. And, Miami, I don't know, man. They just don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to come down to whether they can stop the run game of Michigan State, because once they established the run game, the way they beat Northwestern and Youngstown State was they established a run game that set up the play action with Peyton Thorne and gave them some high percentage throws, ran some pretty beautiful route concepts. If they let Michigan State get into their rhythm, they're going to lose this game. The problem is, I don't know if Michigan State's front 7 can get enough pressure on De'Aaron King to force them to play terrible. This is kind of one of those games where De'Aaron King should be able to step up because he's not going to face an elite defense. This has an upset potential, though. Out of like a scale of 1 to 10, I'll give it like a 5.5 because it's 11 a.m., because it's Michigan State who can run the ball and keep the ball away and wear down this Miami defense. But the question is going to be, does Michigan State have enough dogs on the front end of that defense to get after De'Aaron King? Because if they let him sit in the pocket, he's going to pick that secondary apart.
Well, and only time will tell, my friend. The last game that intrigued me, and you might be surprised, but happened to be number 8 Cincinnati versus Indiana. Before the season started, a lot of people were expecting Indiana could be good. I still think Cincinnati runs away with this game. I just think they're too powerful. But for some reason, it's a scarier opponent than I would like them to be playing.
I think Cincinnati wins this by probably 14 to 20 points minimum, in my opinion. I think they're the better team at every single position on the field. And, you look at what Iowa did to them week 1, in which they forced a lot of turnovers. They ran the ball. Well, Jerome Ford is the running back for Cincinnati, who's an Alabama transfer, a former 5-star running back, and has been lighting it up. You, on top of that, add 4-year starter Desmond Ridder, who can also beat you with his legs. And then their defensive line added Javon Briggs, a defensive tackle who has been an absolute savage on the inside. And Myjai Sanders is one of the highest graded pass rushers on the edge for Cincinnati. And I want you guys to remember this name, Ahmad Gardner at corner. He is, in my opinion, he is the best man-on-man cornerback in the country. And I personally think they're going to force Michael Penix into a bunch of turnovers, a bunch of mistakes. That defense is going to be able to shut Indiana down. I will be surprised if this is not probably a 3-score win for Cincinnati on the road to Indiana this weekend.
And like I said, I expect Cincinnati. There's just something there that I'm just saying. And I'm not predicting Indiana to win. So don't come back next weekend and say, you said Indiana. No, I didn't say that. Now, there is a game that I did pick Arkansas last week, but you didn't give me no credit for that one, but that's okay. Buddy.
Hey, that's a great pick. That's a great pick. I do got to give you props on that one.
But, and those are all the games that I picked that I saw, are there any games off the top, maybe FBS? It doesn't have to be Power 20, top 25. Any Power 5 or FCS games that are intriguing to you that we haven't mentioned?
I mean, I won't break them all the way down. I really like Virginia Tech traveling to West Virginia this weekend.
I almost brought that one up.
That's a great game. And Virginia Tech, who's a top 15 in the country, is an underdog, point spread wise, in that game. A lot of people like West Virginia in that game. I'm not probably one of them. I still think Virginia Tech pulls it out. Yeah. Also, for me, I don't know. I don't know if it'll be an upset. Okay, so don't. I'm not. This isn't like my huge upset pick. But Fresno State at UCLA is going to be very interesting. And it's because Fresno State looked extremely dominant. They almost pulled the upset against Oregon, who we just saw went and smacked Ohio State. Is UCLA overlooking them just a little bit? We keep seeing these teams go on these runs, and then you could just kind of overlook one opponent. And Fresno State has the offense to really shock UCLA if they don't come in that game 100%. And then the other one I had circled here, let me pull it up here, is UAPB, Arkansas Pine Bluff. Our guy mentioned it today because Arkansas has a game with them. They're playing Central Arkansas in a battle of Arkansas type things on the FCS level. Central Arkansas is a top 25 team. Watch that game. Tyler Hudson versus I believe it's Jalen Thigpen is a secondary wide receiver matchup in that game where there are two future NFL stars. I personally believe Tyler Hudson could be the best wide receiver in the whole country over some of these FBS guys. That's how good he is. He was on our show this all season. He's actually coming on our show to preview that game. Check that one out on Saturday night because I think that would be such an interesting FCS matchup to watch.
All right, my friend. Well, guess what? Another week, another day, another night. Great show as always. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we want to thank YouTube, Facebook, but most of all, our newest network, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. You can go to the website on the screen, like the page, and go ahead and listen to all of the Frankly Speaking Sports and College Football Tuesday shows. Before we leave here, Zach, go run with it and tell people. I know you're coming out with a couple of previews. Where they can go ahead and find the previews and go ahead and watch them.
Yeah, you can find us on YouTube, the Blue Bloods, man. We just jumped over 1,000 subs on there. So shout out to any of y'all who are already subscribed. So, can't believe we hit that mark. Yeah, we got 3 to 4 previews dropping every day starting tomorrow. We drop one today, actually. Alabama A&M Bethune-Cookman will be on Thursday night on ESPNU. I should have mentioned that game. Akil Glass is one of the best FCS quarterbacks in the entire country. He was a Walter Payton Award finalist, so check that game out if you want that one. You can find us on YouTube, any and all podcast streaming platforms for just our audio versions, but most of our content can be found on YouTube. It's just the Blue Bloods, which should be the first search result that pops up.
Yep, and then tomorrow night, you can join us on Frankly Speaking Panthers. Will actually be on tomorrow night, 9 p.m. on YouTube and on Facebook. And then the same show will be on Thursday morning on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Tomorrow night, we preview the Panthers and the Saints upcoming this weekend. And our special guest will be John Hendricks from Sports Illustrated, who covers the New Orleans Saints. On behalf of all of us here on College Football Tuesday, we want to thank you very much for joining us. And until next week, good night.